I am so excited to be joined today by Elizabeth Booker Houston, who today left the federal government. How are you feeling?
I'm I'm all the emotions. I'm angry. Um, I'm happy. I'm relieved. I'm so sad. Really just feeling everything right now. It needed to happen. As you know, Aaron, we met in this content creator world, and I've been trying to balance my day job with my activism and what I do in social media. And at the end of the day, my mental health was suffering. My family is suffering because it's basically two careers. And I felt the need to hold on in the federal workforce, especially given my experience, my expertise, specifically with data privacy,
Mhm.
and knowing that so many people were fired, including my husband, who was part of the lawsuit of illegally terminated feds. And eventually I just couldn't do it anymore. And so it needed to happen, but I'm a little sad about how it happened. So
Well, so let's take a step back. And for those who don't know who you are, where you worked, and your story, give a little background. Where were you in the federal government? How long were you there? What's your background?
yeah, so I've been with the Department of Health and Human Services for almost a decade. Specifically in the DC area for it would have been 8 years on September 17th. That would have been my work anniversary when I joined the FDA. So I've worked in a few operating divisions and under a few operating divisions of HHS, including NIH as a biochemistry researcher. So I've been both a scientist and a lawyer for the CDC's Public Health Law program in Atlanta, Georgia. And I then came to Washington, D.C. in 2017 as a presidential management fellow under Trump, which always surprises people. I always laugh and say my first invitation to the White House was under Trump and not Biden. But I've worked under three presidents, four administrations. So Obama administration, Obama Biden administration, Trump Pence administration, Biden Harris, and now Trump Vance. And so I've kind of seen a wide range of what this looks like. And so yeah, I have worked as both a social scientist, a regulatory counsel, I guess not both, but also a government information specialist or privacy analyst at the Food and Drug Administration. And I've been a social scientist at the Administration for Children and Families. So it's like a very long list of things. And I've just kind of seen a lot of different angles of HHS.
I got to ask you about what HHS is today and over the past really now 7 months or so since Trump took office again, RFK became secretary. W- How has it been different, if it has been different from the prior, even from Trump 1?
Completely different. We went from having people who respected the law, respected
Mhm.
science, and respected public health to complete crackpots. I was under FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb. I was under Secretary Azar under the first administration. Tom Price was in there for a minute, but he had a scandal that got him booted out within, I think, the first month that I started my job of using federal funds for private jets. And that might surprise people now because, again, that was during the first Trump administration. Now we're seeing folks like Russ Vought apparently using funds for private security, and they're just like, oh, we're just letting this happen, right? There was actually in Trump 1 a respect by the people involved for following the rules and allowing scientists and allowing experts to do our jobs. This has been a complete 180. I mean, it's a full-scale attack and full dismantling of HHS and ultimately our public health system. It's extremely dangerous. They're allowing things to be put through that aren't just conservative, because again, we've had conservative people. I mentioned Secretary Azar, for example. We have had conservative leadership in HHS. There's a difference between conservative and anti-intellectual.
Mhm.
And what we're seeing is the anti-intellectual side that doesn't really ascribe to any, if you ask me, any sort of values. It's just complete chaos. And they're slashing and burning the entire department and getting rid of critical folks and ultimately putting a lot of Americans at risk.
I want to talk about that risk, but why, I guess, did you stay for 7 months? Why didn't you leave back in January or February when there was a deferred resignation program first in place? And kind of just as this department is changing, why wait it out?
Well, first, because of my role, when I first came into government, like I said, it was as a researcher. And then here, specifically in the DC area at FDA, it was a regulatory council handling the user fee program. And now I've worked my way up into being one of the privacy subject matter experts when it comes to federal privacy law. And given the full attack on data privacy, specifically by Doge, the way that RFK Jr. wanted to do things like make an autism registry,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things that were directly about data privacy, and knowing that there were my mentor at HHS who trained me was riffed. She was fired, right? There were so few privacy experts left, and I felt the need to hang on for as long as possible because I knew that once I left, not only would that leave a gap, but it meant that because of the hiring freeze and everything else, my team wouldn't be able to easily replace me. And again, they've just gotten rid of so many of these data experts. And so I think it's a good part of it is that I was specifically in a field that was so relevant and also extremely precarious.
Right. And I got to ask you because you shared with me this image of your email kind of response. Now that if anyone emails your federal government email, they're now going to get a message that says, "Hello, I'm no longer with the FDA. The U.S. government has been taken over by fascists and incompetent hires selected based on being loyal to a wannabe dictator, not meritocracy. So I'm taking my talents elsewhere to fight this administration." And then it goes on, and I'm going to put the full email below. What prompted you to kind of make that last stand, that last kind of protest, even on your way out of the federal government?
I've been protesting the whole way. I've been extremely public, and I have some thoughts about that I'll get to a little separately. But I made that letter for my coworkers. I needed them to understand that I was one, leaving of my own accord. No one was forcing me out, even though, of course, it became like a work-life balance issue for me. But first of all, no one was forcing me out, and two, I wasn't going to shut up.
Mm.
And I just needed them to know that because the longer, the other reason I stayed, and I mentioned the expertise, but every day that I stayed, I had federal workers, whether terminated or not, former or current, hug me, thank me so much for being in that space, but also speaking out and not being afraid to speak out. And so the email was more so for my colleagues. Um, and I ended the email by saying, "The sun will rise again." And I
Mhm.
was very intentional. The first time I went to the White House in 2018 with the Trump admin for training for my fellowship, I was standing in line to get in, and there was a man in front of me. He asked what I did, and I said, "I'm here as a PMF." He said, "Congratulations, what an honor." And he said, "It's a dark time right now, but we're going to need good people like you to stick around, and the sun will rise again." And that stuck with me. So I wanted to make sure that I passed that message along to my coworkers because while I am leaving the federal workforce, I'm not leaving my advocacy for FDA. I'm just advocating for FDA and HHS in a different way.
And now you talk about your advocacy and your protests throughout the last 7 months. I gotta ask you, why didn't they fire you, given that you've been speaking out every day pretty much against what is happening in the government right now?
So they're cowards. They made something called the DEI watch list, where they
Uh-huh.
purposely found particularly Black women who work in federal government who they deemed to be anti-Trump. And as you know, Aaron,
Were you
um,
at the top?
I wasn't on there at all, not even
Wow.
close. And they purposely, and there's an article that came out, I can't remember which publication, but an article that came out, I believe, yesterday that talked about these mostly Black women who were targeted, not just Black women, they also targeted a white female veteran. They targeted, different folks
Sure.
who they deemed to be Democrats or who had merely donated to a Democratic campaign or, and they were considered to be anti-Trump and they were harassed. They purposely, and the article pointed this out, targeted people who were private, who
Mm.
were not public on social media, people who they thought they could scare and bully. And I think it was very apparent from the jump that I was not a person who could be bullied. And I know you can appreciate that because you always remind them you're not going to shut me up. And I'm in that same boat of you can't bully me, you're not going to shake me. And also, they probably knew that with my platform size, I would be getting support for a very, very big First Amendment lawsuit. And, take them to court. And the last thing
Yeah.
this administration needs is another lawsuit. But that's my best guess. They really wanted to go after people who they thought would be too afraid to speak out. And because I was so public from the very beginning, I think they were like, "Nah, we don't want that smoke."
And what's next for you? What's next for Elizabeth Booker Houston? And if people want to support you, where can they?
Well, I'm still going to be a professor. I'm an adjunct professor for law students. I teach food and drug law, of course, in the spring, for within Indiana University School of Law. And I've recently accepted a position, in the professional school at George Washington University for grad students, where I'll be teaching about content creation, in their PR and comms program. So very excited. So, I will be doing content creation full time. I will also be doing, you know, being a political consultant. I'm very excited to not be under, or rather bound by the Hatch Act anymore.
Mm.
That's going to give me so much more freedom to work on campaigns and hopefully flip some seats in the midterms and do what I can. And if folks want to support me, you can find me on all platforms at Booker Squared. It's BookerSquared. And I'm also on Substack at www.bookersquared.com.
And we're going to link that below. I know your courage. Everyone needs to really hear about your story and your courage. So thank you for coming on and just thank you for speaking out.
No, thank you, Aaron, and thank you for everything you do.